hopefully it's on the right channel. Let's see, live. Here it is. Okay, time to share it around. That I'm doing my drawing stream. Is live. There we go. Excuse me. That was really inappropriate. Let's see. Mapping. Really? Yes. Okay. Cool. I can see the chat now. Ooh, there's a lot of other things you can do too on OBS. That's kind of nice. I didn't realize you could do that. Okay. How many people are watching? Probably just me. I'll probably be talking to nobody. But regardless, we're starting. So I'm gonna start sharing this around. No, don't do that, please. I know I didn't announce it, but I'll be honest. I just kind of want to do this. The last few weeks I've not been working on Emerald Man because number one, I was waiting for Crusader Kings, and number two, honestly, just just kind of farting around and whatnot. But I had a day off today, so I can draw now. I've gotten some of these like regular pages done, so that's good. The issue is I just haven't been drawing, so we're gonna fix that today. There's the panels, right? Yeah. And if nobody comes on, that's fine. I need I've been trying to get motivation for myself. I've been really bad recently about getting my drawing. Ever since I finished the Marrow issues, it's been a little hard on me. So. Because here's the thing, I was really, really hyped for those two, and I drew them really fast and quick. Well, not quick, but I drew them because I was really hyped for them. Because I'll be honest, I've been sitting on the story for a long time, and unfortunately, with that, my hype died off because I had finished the first part of my arc, and I was like, okay, let's take a little bit of a break. But fortunately, taking too long on that stuff. So I'm gonna share the stream with TTV people too. Most of the time I've noticed them watching. Okay, back to drawing. But But anyways, for the most part, I just haven't been on top of things like I should be. Because I was giving myself a break, and I think I've been on too long of one. That's why I tend to not try to give myself breaks, but when I don't, I get burned out. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation. Because the moment you stop, you really don't want to pick back up. You know? And when you don't pick back up, well, suddenly it's like, oh crud, I'm near the end of September and I haven't worked on it much. No, that's not true. Let's see. I have gotten 6 pages done, yeah, and a cover. So that's cool. But I should already be more than halfway done by my usual progress. So, very notably, I have not been on top of it like I should be. And that's entirely my fault. Welcome, whoever came in. Just doing some outline work right now. Let's see, what was she wearing in the previous? I see. Okay. So she had her shoulders exposed a little bit. Okay, better draw that. It's been a hot minute since I drew digitally. It's so easy for me to draw on paper and stuff. I can get things whipped out like that. But digital, I have to put a lot more into it. Just because I am kind of busy. Yes, Google, I logged in to OBS. You don't need to tell me on my phone. Thank you. I know you guys probably have other drawing streams you want to watch too. That's why I'm doing it right now. So I realize there's a lot of people who do Friday streams, but this was a day off I had. Or sorry, not Friday, Saturday streams. This was a day off I had though, and I wanted to do it. So, again, trying to motivate myself. I'm also trying to draw the lady's hands a little bit thinner, because I always notice I make them too big. So, and yeah, I know my brush strokes are as nice and precise as other people. That's why I do a cartoony style. Currently house sitting with my dog. She's taking a nap. I'm glad she's taking a nap, because otherwise she's going to get all hyper and distract the stream like she's done beforehand. Not that I mind. She's a good girl. It's just, well, distracting the stream is annoying. But if you have any questions, please ask them. That's one of the things I'm doing here. Oh shoot, I forgot this page is a bit of a spoiler. Oh well, whatever. I'm sure people already would have figured it out anyway. So this is Christina. She's a new character coming into this next issue. You guys met her last issue. She's actually one of my old. She's unlike Marrow and Emerald Man and whatnot. She's a very old character. In fact, I believe I debuted when I was younger. I debuted her. Like I would draw my Emerald Man comics in middle school, in high school, just on my own free time on like scratch paper and crud. And she was an important character because, well, as you guys are noticing, she's holding up a costume here. She's kind of Emerald Man's partner in crime, at least before I made Danu. Danu was originally meant to replace her, but here's the thing. I've been longing to bring this character back because when I was writing my script, I always thought, like, man, this was a character who was a big part of the mythos when I was younger, and I would feel very bad not including her again. That, and, well, you know what happened with Carolina last issue. She betrayed Steven, and so I was like, she needs a new love interest. And so, if that's the case, I'm going to introduce his old one. His very first one I wrote as a kid, actually. Because he has to think, Carolina was not originally intended to be his love interest when I first made the character. It was his character. That's why she's being introduced now. I believe when I was younger, when I introduced her, when I introduced her when I was younger, like, I didn't even have a proper secret identity for her for a little bit. It was just, so, I named her Crystal, originally. As, like, her superhero persona. There was Emerald Man and there was Crystal. And then eventually I realized, I realized when I was younger there was already, like, characters named that and everything, and I was like, well, I wanna have a distinct name for her. So, instead, I went with Sapphire, because it was another type of gem that was blue colored, and I was already coloring her blue. And so that's why I've been associating her with blue colors. Why I decided to call her Sapphire Swan now? Well, I'll get into that in later issues, but needless to say, it has to do with Celtic myth, as it usually does with Emerald Man. Okay, that's those drawn. I made some tricky panels and drawings here in this issue. It's my fault because I wanted. It was because I wanted to. I wanted to make the. I've been wanting to make the pages look more dynamic. I don't know. The problem is the silhouette makes it look like she has a big old nose. Yeah, I kind of didn't think about that, did I? Yeah. It's okay. It'll have to do. Again, if y'all have questions, just let me know. I will answer them in the chat. I really like having good questions. Base Department Deluxe Edition. Congratulations to my friend Tristan. I believe he proposed. If his Discord thing means anything, means that. So I'm gonna go congratulate him. Yep. Where is that thing? Press the very base, indeed. There we go. Alright, back to what I was doing. So yeah, drawing some like smaller stuff is not always easy. This doesn't look right. I'm tempted just to keep it as a silhouette just because it makes it a little bit easier to draw out, but I don't want people thinking I'm lazy, it's just makes it much easier. Especially we're at a distance like this, the characters. At least that's my opinion. So I didn't draw a detail in the not rough draft, but the paper either. So. Alright, the rest of this is background outlines. Oh, that's right, that's not a building, that's a truck. It's intended to be a truck. There we go. Forgot about that. I've always struggled with perspective. If you want a weakness from me in drawing, it's perspective. I've never been good with it. I try to practice as much as I can, it's just some reason I struggle with it. That's one reason I made this a silhouette, so I can do that. Colin, that's lazy. Well, you know what, when you're drawing you need to take shortcuts sometimes. Believe me, like, every animator, every artist you know, they will take shortcuts if they can. Especially when they're like me and they're doing stuff quite often. my animators like changed over to 3D animation because you can get things done faster with it instead of having to draw over and over and over again. I don't like it as much. I've never been the biggest fan of the 3D animation style. I don't think it looks as good, but I understand why it's used practically. It's just easier on the artists. Gosh, I forgot about this. Oh. Yeah, we're doing this. Not quite what I wanted to do. Okay, never mind. Let's see, gotta get it aligned here. Maybe that's how I did it with my pencils anyway. It looks more about how I did it, yeah. Okay. So, brick, brick, brick. Nope. Brick, 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 brick. Then move it over to here. There. Brick, 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 brick. No, that doesn't look good. Yeah, I've always struggled with this kind of stuff. Just do this manually. That's why I didn't draw the second window here, because I realized, like, I made it really tight there. It does not look that good to me in the rough draft. Or not rough draft, but the original page I drew. So, just skipping that part. That looks much better there. Okay. I truly need to practice on cars and buildings and stuff more. That's why I've been drawing this comic, so I can get more practice. It always looks rough, I know. I've always struggled with it. I can draw natural things perfectly fine. But it's these really big geometrical shapes I don't do well with. Never really have, to be honest. Especially cars. That's been a big, like, Achilles heel for me is cars. I try to avoid them as much, drawing them as much as I can, too. I know, that's a bad thing. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this comic, because I realized I'll get more practice the more I draw it. So. There we go. See, that's not too bad now. That's not too bad. The reader can tell what's going on. Oh, I do need to draw the interior panes there, though. Trying to give it an authentic, like, look, because you'll find windows that look like this in Oregon a lot, because a lot of our buildings our modern buildings were built in like the 1910s or the 20s. So start from the bottom up instead. How about that? And in the 1920s, 30s, they really liked this. I don't know what to call it here. Just turn my pen pressure. This kind of six-paned window, and a lot of architecture here in Oregon has it. That was built around that time. So a lot of our government buildings were made, as well as our hotels, theaters. Basically, a lot of stuff was built around that time. Because originally, Oregon was pioneer country. And so all of our towns, like, outside of the major cities, a lot of towns are still really small. They kind of look like Western towns still, from, like, Western movies. At least in my opinion, they do. Just if you put a bunch of modern stuff in it. Okay, done with that panel. That annoying panel. And I can go back to drawing my favorite thing, which is human faces. Had a coworker ask me, is that scar going to be permanent at the end of issue 13? Yeah, it's permanent. Absolutely permanent. I realized when I was drawing the issue, I'm like, if she's gonna slash his face, I need to make a permanent scar just for the sake of like making it look like what she did, what Marrow did to him, wounded him significantly. And remains a wound on him because of what she did. I'm glad, by the way, everybody's perception of the Marrow was good. I was really afraid people would dislike her. I don't know if that's just my intuition telling me, like, maybe I made a mistake here, or if it's just nervousness. It could very well be nervousness. Probably chalk it up to nervousness. Also, like, I was really, what I was really afraid about, I think mostly, was that people might think it came out of left field and like, why would Carolina ever do all that stuff? Hence why I had to explain it in that issue, because I did have people asking like, well, hold on, why is she like this? Why is she doing that? And that was part of the mystery. I did drop hints like constantly, but some less than subtle, some a little more subtle. I am in. So what we're entering now for Emerald Man is what I would call my second, I guess second volume, but more like the second part of the story I had planned. The stuff with the Marrow and everything, that was the first part. That was the first part of the story. Now we're entering part 2. And I don't know how long part 2 is going to be. It could, I have a feeling it's going to be quite quick. Actually. But it really depends, because I'll be honest, I planned out the first 13 issues way ahead of time, and I've written scripts for these ones, but I'm still unsure about the scripting for these next following issues. This one I was very confident in. It took a few rewrites, but this one I'm more confident in now. I have scripts for this issue and the next prepared. I need to write more of them. Truth be told, though, I've been writing less scripts and more synopsises myself nowadays because I've been noticing, like, I'm basically doing the Marvel method, but for myself. Kind of like what Jack Kirby did, where he would just, like, he wouldn't even look at Stan's synopsises after a while. He would just tell Stan Lee, write the dialogue, and that's it. And Jack Kirby would just come up with the whole story. Kind of becoming like that. And you know, that's great. I think some artists can do that, although I do think it's kind of... Here's a hot take for you guys. I think that not every artist should be doing what Jack Kirby did. I think a lot of artists in the industry don't know how to write. And really need a writer, because they can make good artwork, but when they try to write, it's not good. It's really not good. Of course, some people might say, well, your writing sucks too, Colin, and if they feel that way, okay. It doesn't really bother me. I'm satisfied with my own writing. I'm writing what I think I would want to read. Which is more Silver Age style stories. It's why I try not to beef nowadays with other indie comic artists and stuff, because I disagree with what a lot of people think. A lot of people still like that 90s style, like, comic book where, like, things are a little... Because that's when indie comics kind of grew big. And so a lot of people like that stuff, but I'll be honest, I've never been a big fan of that stuff. And no, I'm not trying to be like a Marvel shill either, even though I love Marvel comics, like the old ones anyway. I just... A lot of it I'm just not into. I'm very picky, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't like Deadpool, I don't like all those characters that were all, like, assassins and edgy and everything like that back then. And for some reason, like, you see projects of indie comics and they keep trying to do that kind of stuff. They keep doing these, like, deconstructed superhero worlds because that's what's popular, but I don't like it myself when you're going to do superhero comics anyways. I'll be honest, I found more enjoyment when it comes to non-superhero comics nowadays, because I just don't think people are doing them good anymore. The exception is Omega Girl. I really liked Omega Girl. I don't tend to read DC comics, but it reminded me of like good DC comics from back then, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I've been itching for. I do have my critiques of Omega Girl. And this, I know it sounds super petty, but she really needs, like, a mask or something, because the only thing that changes for her, like, facial appearance is her hair color. And, like, that doesn't... Maybe from a distance that does stuff, but she still has the same freaking face. I'm sorry, it bothers me to no end. Like, even Clark Kent and Supergirl, they wear glasses, which actually makes a big difference with identity. And they also change their posturing and stuff. My problem with Omega Girl is that she doesn't really do that. She just kind of goes around with her bare face in her civilian identity and her regular one. Now, I think her regular self looks great. Well, sorry, her, like, normal superhero self looks great with the costume. Don't change that. If you're gonna... if you're going to have her have the secret identity, which I like that aspect. I've always liked that aspect in comic books. then I think they should give her like glasses or oh, sorry. They should give her something to make her face look different or something like that. Or if you could do like what I've seen some people do, where when she's going super fast and she's her superhero self, like they can't catch her face and it blurs, or something like that. But ultimately, I just feel like she needs to do a little bit more because I'm not someone that begs for realism in comics. Heck, I'm not even doing that in my own comic. But stuff like that bothers me because I think that's the bare minimum of realism that you need is like the secret identity thing. Because even Superman, they understood that when they first created him back in the 30s. That he needed a secret identity because you're technically a vigilante. Like Omega Girl isn't working like she. The reason I had Emerald Man deputized was because I got the idea from the Batman '60s TV show. Because I'll be honest, I've never enjoyed it in comic books where like you're always running from the law. I mean, yeah, I get it's realistic, but it's so tiresome because the same story just keeps happening over and over. And so, what I made it so Emerald Man would just get simply deputized. Because I didn't want to deal with that. And I wanted him to be able to basically work work as someone who can enforce the law on his own. If that makes any sense. Excuse me. I just ate lunch not too long ago. Other than that, though, I love Omega Girl. Another comic I love is Matt Krautz's Kyrie. That's a great comic book, in my opinion. But then again, I'm also more of like a history dude. I love history. I've always been a big fan of history. I majored it in college. Now everyone's like, "Oh, Colin, you never got a good job." Well, you know what? I went to college for mostly education, anyways. I wanted to teach. That didn't pan out well, but it's okay. You don't always get to pursue your dreams. That's something I learned very quickly in life. If you want your dreams to happen, you kind of got to do it yourself. That's why I'm making Emerald Man, because I realized, look, nobody's gonna make Emerald Man for me. I kept delaying it, thinking, okay, I need to fix this and that and that. But then eventually I just realized, like, I'm never gonna make Emerald Man if I don't get started on it now. Is my art that great? Not really. I don't think it's like the best art ever, but it's adequate enough where you can tell what's going on. I think about it, this was a very spoilery page, the show. I probably shouldn't have drawn this one on stream, but it's okay. You guys don't really know the context of what's going on anyway, so. Well, besides fetch here. So, yeah. Don't really know what else to say besides the fact that Fetch is running here. Oh, when it comes to, I just want to say one thing. to people who I'm sure are going to be listening afterwards. So with Carolina, I had someone ask me like, well, why didn't you make it more like mysterious and whatnot? Why were you so blatant about it? So here's the thing. Have you guys ever read like the original Hobgoblin like appearances in Spider-Man? Because if you have, you're gonna understand why I was so cautious about building up the mystery and stuff. So Hobgoblin, when he first appeared, nobody knew his identity. Well, besides his creator Roger Stern. Stern intended him to be like this fashionista dude named Roger Kingsley, who was a pretty common like crook. Well, rather he was just kind of corrupt, where he would steal people's fashion ideas and stuff. I've never liked that explanation. I know it's the canon explanation now because they went back and actually retconned it to be that way. I've never liked that ever. I thought it was lame because the only like hints he gave was that he had a brother who just looked identical to him, which was kind of stupid. Which is why I'm not a fan of that. I've never been a big fan of that story for that reason. Anyways, if you know anything about the original Hobgoblin, he had a really great mystery that built up. And they spent several issues, like, showing his little, like, stealing the Green Goblin's, like, chemicals and testing out things and, like, disposing of henchmen as, like, patsies and stuff. It was really good. It was really good. The only issue is they didn't resolve it well because the original author had to leave. Now, I get it. I'm working on it by myself. But when I saw that happen, it really made me get a bit of a distaste for how the Hobgoblin was handled because it was such a good storyline originally. But unfortunately, there was too many cooks in the kitchen, and they completely mishandled how it was going to be done. And with the whole mystery thing, I felt like it was more compelling when we didn't know who Hobgoblin was than finally figuring out who the heck he was. Because the moment you do, it was kind of lame. And even then, I've read about how Tom DeFalco originally was going to have it be Richard Fisk when he took over after Roger Stern. In my opinion, that would have been a way better choice. But even still, like, I think the whole identity thing that was the mistake. Was that they built it. That's actually one of the reasons I don't really like it in comic books nowadays. When the whole like, who is this person kind of thing they pull off of. It worked with the original Green Goblin. It worked with the Hobgoblin. But the issue is, with the original Green Goblin, when they revealed who he was, yeah, it was shocking. But they also had more to it with Norman Osborn, because he was Peter's friend and he also had his own motivations and stuff. And he had his own character. So the mystery part was cool, and then you added onto it. Hobgoblin, they didn't. The whole point was that it was a mystery. And the moment the mystery was unveiled, it just fell flat. Because they didn't have much else over his character. At least that's my opinion on it. And so Carolina, I realized, yeah, she has her own character, but why focus on making a mystery of who the Marrow is? Because my original plan was just, hey, don't show anything about the Marrow at all. Only drop subtle hints and have this character show up in the background, or I was gonna, sorry, I was gonna have it so like the manipulation would still be there, but you weren't sure why it was happening. And I wasn't going to reveal anything. And then I realized when I was drawing issue 5, I was like, no, I really don't want to do that, because when people had read my scripts, they didn't pick up on the clues. And, like, I didn't even show her being very obvious with the manipulation. It was even more subtle in my original scripts. And when that happened, people didn't pick up on it when they were reading it. So it came as they were like, oh, this is surprising. I didn't realize that. My issue is, this is my issue with most twists in general. A twist is shocking for a moment, but once everybody knows it, it's not. It kind of loses its gravity. And so you really need something else to supplement. When you do a twist, you need something else to make it like worthwhile and last longer. Why did the Darth Vader twist work so well? Because he was Luke's father. That was a story that was building up in the original Star Wars. Like, we didn't know his parents, and you wanted to know desperately. And so when Lucas inserted that into the script of Episode 5, it's like, wow, that not only solves a problem, but it also gives a new part of the story for Luke Skywalker to deal with. His father is the most evil man in the galaxy. That sucks. It's great storytelling. And same with the original Green Goblin. Norman Osborn's like, oh, this is my best friend's father. Not only that, but he's unaware of what he's doing as the Green Goblin sometimes. At least in the original stories. I know they retcon that, which... I'm not a fan of most Marvel retcons. They tend to be very bad and just ruin all the characterization, but that's a rant for another day. But even then, like, you have the dynamic of Norman Osborn, like, thinking, oh no, I can't become the Goblin again, but he can't help it. It's an alternate personality and crud. The issue with the Hobgoblin was the whole gravitas of his character was being a mystery. In the end, if Spider-Man had figured it out or not, in the end, it still wasn't going to make a big impact in the story. Cool, you figured it out. This is a hot take here. When I first read it was like Ned Leeds. Spoilers. Even though it wasn't actually Ned Leeds. I thought, okay, that's kind of stupid. And that was it. Now, imagine if it was Roger Kingsley, like, canon, and they actually did that back then. I would have thought, well, that's kind of stupid. Or even with Richard Fisk, I would have thought it was kind of stupid. Why? Because there's not really much to the character of Hobgoblin besides being cunning. Like, the way he's written as a villain is great. He was cunning, he was smart, maniacal. The issue is revealing his identity doesn't do anything to that characterization. It doesn't, in my opinion. So, it was, in my opinion, kind of pointless. It would have... It's what I'm... That was another thing that fed into Fetch, actually, because I had read Hobgoblin, and that was a little bit of an inspiration for how I handled Fetch, even though I intended him to always be kind of a no-name. So, one thing for Fetch was that I actually did reveal his identity in, like, the story you guys read in issues. I think it was... right now I'm forgetting my own freaking story. It was issues 9 and 10. Originally I revealed who he was. He had a whole backstory and everything like that. But here's the thing, I just was not satisfied with it every time. And then I realized after reading I read through most of the original Spider-Man run in college when I was actually writing my scripts, actually. And I realized, like, man, I liked it better when I didn't know who the Hobgoblin was. He kinda sucks. And that was something I considered with Fetch. I was like, well, Fetch, I like him better when I don't know his identity. He's a little bit more scary. And so that's why I made the decision to say, you know what, I'm just not revealing who he is in that issue. I'm gonna keep him anonymous because, I'll be honest, that's more compelling. You know him as Fetch. That's his character. That's who he is. You don't know his original identity, and to be honest, that's not as important. May I reveal it sometimes? Maybe. I'm thinking about it. But I'm not so sure. I have drawings. I know his name. I'm not gonna say it here. But I have drawings, I know his name and all that other stuff. But I'm not sure I want to reveal that. Because again, Like what I was saying with Hobgoblin, it's a much more interesting character when you don't know who they are, because you're judging them only based off of their actions as this anonymous character, which in my opinion is more compelling. Not knowing who this character is just it's far more satisfying. But of course, you can't just Colin. You can't just leave him hanging. I agree. You can't really leave audiences hanging all the time. But that's one of the reasons I kept everything I did for Fetch still in the issues I had with his origin story and everything with Danu. Because the actions of why he got cursed, I figured was far more important to tell for the curious reader than who he actually was. At least with like the name and the actual face, that's not as important. Knowing who he was previously, that was, and that's what I wanted to reveal, and that's why I did what I did. I just have so many problems with the Hobgoblin story. It's interesting because I thought Roger Stern did a good job with like his first appearances in Spider-Man. He was a great character. I don't hate him. There's a reason they haven't used him again for most of the time nowadays, though. It's because, well, he kind of, without his secret being, well, a secret, you kind of have no gravitas. And even then, after a while, you're reading those stories and you're thinking, gosh, when are they revealing his freaking identity? And that's why that's a problem. Relying only on, like, someone's face being hidden the whole entire time, like, wondering who this person is. That's the only thing they got going for him. In terms of, like, wanting to figure out more about this character. That sucks, in my opinion. That's bad. Probably should have drawn that on an actual outline, huh? Okay. You just need characterization for everything. A mystery is not a... What the heck? Did I draw this in the... Oh no, I drew this in the background layer, didn't I? Okay, I think I did. Heck, I did. Okay. I was wondering why it was being so weird. It's okay, it doesn't really matter. I get like that where I forget. Anyways, to me it's just more compelling to actually characterize somebody and making the actual, like, if the Hobgoblin's identity, if they had not focused on his identity so much, I genuinely think that story would have gone down as one of the best in all time, Spider-Man. Unfortunately, the identity was a hook, line, and sinker. You had to like make that the big mystery there. Which again isn't bad, but there's got to be proper payoff or something. That can't be the only story you're running, because it will get tiresome, which it did, and it will go on too long, which it did. Which is one of the reasons why with Marrow I was very obviously trying to tell you this character, Carolina, is not to be trusted. Because number one, again, my readers who I first introduced the story to, they were like, "Oh, I missed out on a lot of these things," and I was realizing, okay, I need to be less subtle because otherwise they're going to completely miss it. Two, I needed to be a little bit more willing to show that she's not a good guy from the very beginning, because I also had to be a little bit less, because in my original scripts it was really quickly revealed that she was a Marrow, and that was a mistake too. So I had to be a little bit more careful on that. Whew, tiring myself out just with all the talking. And I just keep ranting about the Hobgoblin story. I feel bad about ranting your guys' ear off with the Hobgoblin story. It's just, it could have been handled better, and it's always been a cautionary tale I think about when I'm writing my scripts or I'm drawing them out. I just think, okay, how do I not disappoint the readers here? With Fetch, it's don't do something like that will disappoint people by I don't know, doing something stupid. Oops. Doing something stupid like, oh hey, here's his real face and name and everything like that. Because again, such things are identity. Just a whole character being based off their identity, kind of loses its purpose once you understand their identity, once you know who they are. Which is why the mask needs to be their identity, like I did with Fetch. Fetch was going to be the same guy whether he got cursed or not. That's the whole point. He will always be that dork who does that stuff. And that's okay. As for Steven's characterization, I'm starting to feel like I need to add a little bit more into it. But my issue is every idea I have is just going to probably make him a little unlikable. And admittedly, this is a problem I've always had, is I find myself writing my side characters more interesting. Truth be told, I was rewatching Spider-Man 1 last night, and I was more, I got a little bit more into it. The 2002 one, of course, not the other series that they've made, which have not been as good. Yeah, I'm a Tobey Maguire fanboy. What of it? I don't, you know, I knew some people in like other comic communities, and they told me, "Oh, well, he's not that great." I get that he's not the most accurate version of Spider-Man, but the whole feel, the Raimi films, feels far more like the comics than the other two. Just by far, they get the world building much better. I feel like it feels more like those movies still like to feel like the closest adaptation of the source material to me. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Regardless, I know comic book Peter Parker's a little bit less awkward and everything, but I think that's the part I like about Maguire's Peter Parker is he's a nerd, he's antisocial, and he just doesn't ever know how to speak for himself. That was a big inspiration for Steven for me when I was younger. That's why he was so quiet and reserved and everything. However, I will not be using Mary Jane Watson as a in those movies as a guideline for how to write my female characters. That's the biggest disappointing part about those Raimi films to me, because comic book Mary Jane before like the retcons they've made and whatnot, I feel like everybody does it wrong. Even the comics do it wrong. In her first, even I think Stan Lee originally did her kind of wrong, because she's kind of a jerk in her first few appearances. Honestly, she was okay. She was actually a good mystery. And there's a reason for that. It's because they hyped her up to be like this girl that Peter Parker was getting constantly told about when he was looking for a girlfriend, and all the other choices didn't work out for him besides like Gwen Stacy. But then when he finally sees her, she's like this smoking hot redhead. It's not only hilarious because he was thinking she was ugly, because they always talked about how much of a great personality she had, but also it worked as a reveal because it was exactly what you were expecting. You were thinking, oh, maybe Peter's just an idiot and he's rejecting like the hottest girl on the planet. And yeah, it's what he was doing. And for all those people who are super into Gwen Stacy over Mary Jane, I respect your opinion. I really do, because I'll be honest, I think that was what, from what I recall, that's what Stan Lee intended was for Gwen Stacy to be his girlfriend overall, and that Mary Jane was kind of a red herring. Get it? Because of her red hair. But I don't know. See, this is something I just can't agree with because plot wise, it doesn't. It makes more sense to me that the girl that you've been building up to would be the woman that he's gonna be with on there. At least that's just my opinion. Oh, I see why I got confused. It just makes more sense to me that Mary Jane would be the girl he chooses. Now, again, I understand that that wasn't the original case, and that Stan Lee wanted him to go Gwen. And you know what? There's actually good criticism of going for Gwen instead because she actually matched Peter Parker's personality a lot more. She was more into science, at least originally, because later on she got kind of turned into this generic girl that nobody cares about. But originally she was into science. She was really intelligent. Kind of like the way they portray her in the Amazing Spider-Man movies is probably the best part of those because they portray her more like how I think she was originally intended when Ditko introduced her and everything like that, and Lee did. But then later on, she kind of just morphed into this like, oh, soap opera cry girl and everything like that. Oh, how dare you do all these things? And then she kind of just you kind of lose the plot. And you think, yeah, no, she sucks. If you're going off, at least that's how I think Gary Conway saw it. You know, I don't agree with the decision of killing off Gwen Stacy. That was a bad move. I used to think, oh, what a great story, but reading it again as an adult, I'm like, this is really mean spirited. It also makes me think like the fact that Peter Parker is doing what he's doing because he thinks, oh, I need to be responsible, and then the very thing he's doing to try to be responsible gets his girlfriend killed. Makes you think, well, maybe this is an irresponsible thing to try to be doing superheroics. But no, that's not how it's portrayed. It's like, oh, no, 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 no. You just gotta try harder, Peter Parker. And it's like, I'd rather just get over it. And it's like, that's not how I would react to that situation. I would just give up right there, thinking this was a bad idea to start doing superhero cred. Because people constantly are getting hurt from it. What's even the point of a secret identity then? And of course, I know the Green Goblin figured out the secret identity. I understand that. But it's just, I would have given up there. Well, that's why Peter Parker's made of stronger stuff. You're right. And I like that Conway gives Mary Jane a moment to shine, but I ultimately agree with him and other Marvel writers who thought, well, she's the much better love interest. I'm getting off track. The reason why I thought Gwen worked was because she fitted Peter's personality more. However, I still prefer Mary Jane. And no, it's not because I have red hair, although I've been a little biased there. No, I think that... So Gwen, I feel like if Peter went with Gwen, story-wise, it makes more sense. Their personalities mesh together. But the reason I like Mary Jane more is because, at least in later comics, she challenges Peter as a wife. Because yes, they eventually get married. He has to... I think if Gwen Stacy could like get over the fact that because she thought, oh no, Spider-Man killed my dad, if that got cleared up and everything, she'd be supportive. And I think that's really about all it would come to. Which is not a bad dynamic, having a girlfriend and whatnot that'd be supportive. The reason I like Mary Jane so much is because I feel like she would constantly get Peter out of his shell because he's still antisocial, even when he becomes a little nicer after the Ditko comics. He's still incredibly antisocial, and Mary Jane's like, no, you gotta get out of your shell and everything like that, bro. You gotta get out of your shell, Tiger. And cred like that, you know. That's kind of why I like her a little more. She just gets Peter Parker out of his shell. She manages to be supportive in ways he needs as a man, instead of being supportive in ways that just enable his current behavior constantly. Because if you guys have read original Spider-Man written by Ditko, I love Ditko. I love what he did with the original version of Spider-Man. I know Stan Lee disagrees, but I really like sometimes that he's a humongous jerk to people. It's hilarious. Now to Ditko, he wasn't being he was right to be that way, and I really enjoy seeing how Ditko interprets Ayn Rand's objectivism and how closely he stuck to that philosophy. It gives me a lot of respect for him, even if I don't agree with it, because at least Ditko is consistent. It's a big reason I like it. I like him, and I like the way he wrote classic Spider-Man with Stan Lee. So, again, I understand people who like Gwen more when it comes to like Spider-Man love interests, but I've always been more into Mary Jane. It's just, the plot-wise, it just makes more sense to me because they built her up and everything. She was made to be Peter Parker's love interest. And I'll be honest, I kind of subverted that in with Carolina, because I built her up to be that way too, but then eventually you realize, oh no, she was just using Steven. Is it horrible? Yeah. Is it a mean thing to do? Yeah, but I always intended that with the character. However, this is where I have a point of contention, because I think killing Gwen off was a bad idea. It was very mean-spirited. Especially since Stan Lee originally intended Gwen to be the choice Peter makes. I believe in some of the Mexican versions of Spider-Man, they kept Gwen alive because they didn't like that decision, and he's still with her. Which I find interesting that they just decided to break with Marvel continuity. But you know what? Mexico can do it at once on that. It's better than just taking out Peter Parker's love interest by giving her some giving them some demonic divorce crud. It's the worst part of modern Spider-Man. Oh, but Colin, they wanted to reboot it for general audiences. Screw that. They had something good there with the marriage. Oh, but the writers didn't like it. Okay. The readers did. You should be writing that the... Should be right when you're something like Marvel, where it's not like they're an indie comic where the writers should be like doing stuff that they want, can be doing whatever they want. I don't... Peter Parker's marriage was one of my favorite parts of like the 90s comic books in the like late 80s. It's nice having a superhero be married, because that's a whole... I think comic writers need to realize this. A lot of people get married, like lots of people. That's a normal part of life for them. And Spider-Man was already having a lot of adult readers anyways. I mean, think about it. You take him off the spinner shelf. You take the comic off the spinner rack, or like out of normal stores. Young kids aren't reading Marvel comics anymore. They were trying to get that audience back, and it completely failed anyways. They only really get the books at like book fairs, and let's be real. And so the moment you decide, oh well, the marriage isn't popular with kids, which I always think that's one of the biggest and lamest excuses ever. The fact of the matter is, they hated them being married. They wanted to get rid of it because they couldn't figure out how to keep the dynamic going. I thought that was a bull crud. He could have had kids. He should have had kids. That's why I like the MC2 of Spider Girl. Much better. My opinion, the original Spider-Man run ends with the Venom symbiote crowd and all the symbiotes and crowd. That's the last part of Peter Parker's journey. Once that happens, story's over. Once like maximum carnage and crud happens, that's the last part of original Spider-Man. Because that's the last part I really enjoyed. Everything else was really downhill from there. And then it picks back up with the MC2, with Spider Girl and stuff. That's the good timeline. That's the good ending. Instead, we're in this terrible timeline where Peter Parker's still a broke loser and whatnot. And I know Marvel writers like, oh, but that's what makes him so relatable. Here's the thing: when I read my comic books, I like Peter Parker being relatable. I don't like him being a broke loser. It feels bad. It looks bad. It made sense when he was a college student in crud, but you can't keep him in college forever. He's like canonically in his mid-30s now, from what I recall. Maybe even older than that. He's still a broke loser. It doesn't feel good. I guess Spider-Man's more of a classical anti-hero, but good grief, let him have some happiness. Oh, but that's not as interesting. Well, I don't care. What a writer finds interesting, a reader does not. Always. That point is lost on so many writers nowadays too. And that's one of the reasons with my comic, I try to get people to actually read it, see if they like it, when I did all my scripts and stuff. I read my own stuff, try to have an unbiased eye on it, trying to think, oh well, would I like this as a reader? And if I don't, I rewrite it. Like issue 14 took a few rewrites for me because I was not satisfied with it at all. I had a story where like Fetch was gonna bomb something and everything like that, and I was like, this doesn't make sense for the character, and I kind of wrote it up real quick, and I just didn't. None of the pieces, everything felt like it was forced together. None of the pieces felt like they were cohesive and fit. That's one of the reasons why now I'm trying to. I had to make a rewrite. I wasn't satisfied. And that's really all it really comes down to as a writer, to be honest. You gotta think about what you as a. This is why the best practice as a writer is reading other people's stuff and think, do I like this in a book or not? Don't go off of what some professional writers tell you, like, oh, you gotta have these deep characters and stuff. And yeah, think about that. But you gotta also think, what do I like about this? If you don't like it, then I don't know. Just as a writer, don't write because you think you. Don't write what you enjoy, because clearly Spider-Man writers currently think, oh, it's such a good idea to make Peter Parker this broke loser who gets completely, like, he doesn't even have a good love life anymore, some other man likes the woman he likes, all this stupid soap opera bull crud that nobody's interested in. And then they have the audacity to say, "Oh, you'd be surprised how unpopular the marriage was with fans," which such bull crud. Because I was in Marvel comic groups for like years, And it was always a common topic of how the marriage of Peter Parker was such a missed thing that they wanted back. I mean, they brought back Superman's marriage in the comics, and people like that crud. We like seeing our favorite characters be successful with their love life, with money, and everything like that. I don't understand why Peter Parker can't get out of college, why he can't, like, they had him do Parker Industries. Great idea, executed poorly. I like the idea of Peter Parker being successful. I don't like the fact that they did it in such ways where it compromised his character. Or they compromised what the audience thinks should happen. Now, granted, okay, not everything the audience wants is good. I will give him that. Because sometimes the audience can want something terrible. Fans are not always right about everything. I agree with that. But in this instance, I think the writers are wrong. Especially when there really wasn't anything problematic about Peter Parker's marriage. It fit well in the stories. You got so much drama out of it. The stories were so good in the late 80s and early 90s. You had Venom and all these other villains going around and stuff. That stuff was enjoyable. It made it into the Spider-Man mythos, and then you take it away because readers can't relate to being married. Such stupidity. There's this weird idolatry with comic writers with the holy grail of relatability. My character needs to be relatable. It needs to be relatable. And I'll be honest, it's a good guideline, but I really think it's overblown nowadays. Make your character feel like a real person. That doesn't mean they have to be relatable. Because I can enjoy a relatable character, but I also understand these superheroes are not real people. They have extraordinary powers. I want to read about that too. I don't want to read about how, Peter Parker's getting his love life ruined again for the trillionth time. It gets stale, it gets boring. The reason I don't really focus on that stuff in Emerald Man, I'm more interested in all the other... I'm more interested in the fun stuff, like, Stephen... I obviously gave him a job. I gave him a regular life and stuff that he enjoys. I try to show him living. But that's not the central point of the comic. My readers read Emerald Man because they like the story. They like the story of Celtic stuff going on. They like the action. They like the villains. That's the thing I've got the most praise on is my villains and like the story surrounding them and whatnot. They like all the antics that go on. They're not really interested in the he's gonna get kicked out of his house after a while. You can do that kind of storytelling. It's good, actually. But it's just you gotta be careful how much of it you use. Because again, it grows stale. It's like, I like Denny O'Neil as a writer, but I thought his Spider-Man was one of the worst Spider-Man runs I read. Because it's ironic because I've seen people praise it like, oh yeah, he made Peter Parker relatable again. No, he sent him back to the status quo. Just because, now he's living in an apartment by himself, and actually he doesn't like the Bugle anymore. He's going to work somewhere else that actually pay him better. That part was okay, but it didn't really pay off to anything. Instead, we get a Peter Parker that kind of just exists and get rid of his love life again and everything like that. I'm just tired of modern comics, honestly. There's a reason why I find it so ironic now, Marvel is like, we gotta start copying manga and make manga imprints. They think it's just the manga itself that's popular, not what's going on with the writing. they seem to forget that nobody likes reading about their main characters feeling bad. Oh, but Colin, what about My Hero Academia? I've seen a lot of people not like the ending. Now, I haven't watched much of the anime, but I watched a few episodes of the first parts and I realized it was not for me. Too cynical. Too cynical. Am I kind of cynical? Oh, yeah. Emerald Man's Bill is a little cynical. Don't get me wrong. I understand I write my stuff kind of cynically. But that's not the main point of it. And if it is, well, I see. I really don't get why, like, Hollywood or comic writers or book writers, what is the deal with everybody wanting to make these really depressing stories nowadays? I understand tragedy as a genre. Don't get me wrong. I like Shakespeare. I like classical mythological tragedy. But it wasn't cynical and painful for the sake of being cynical and painful. I just feel like nowadays it's like, oh, you gotta have people treat each other like crud because it's interesting. No, not really. You're supposed to be telling a story first and foremost. If the story involves a character in pain, then yes, do that. But I just feel like we're more getting people are more just. It's so pervasive in like all so much media nowadays, and movies, games, TV, and whatnot. It's tiresome to me. I'm tired of it. Not every story needs to be tragedy. No, I'm not going to comment on Breaking Bad either because I haven't watched it. But from what I have read and seen clips of, it's a way better tragedy than most other things I've seen. Game of Thrones, I don't like that. It's stupid. It's stupid. Game of Thrones was written to basically. It's like the classical 80s, like dark fantasy that people like so much. There's an audience for it. And no, I'm not going to say it was a response to Tolkien. I don't actually believe that. I've seen evidence to the contrary, but even though Martin kind of says that was part of it, I don't believe him on that for everything. Why don't you believe the own writer? Because I don't think he wrote that to. People will say he was trying to spite Tolkien. I don't agree with that. I think Tolkien's works were an inspiration to him. But regardless, I think he was more. It looks to me he always seems more like he was inspired by like actual medieval politics. But I think he also had too cynical of a view of it. I also think he had too cynical of a view of other things. His stories are based around cynicism, not a criticism of Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. Because I can tell the guy still likes Lord of the Rings. I just don't think he did as good as a job as Tolkien. But Colin, Tolkien's characters were very one-dimensional. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. Lord of the Rings is a perfectly adequate, beautiful story based off of Norse mythology and Anglo-Saxon mythology. It's enjoyable. It's a good book. I've never once, when I was reading Lord of the Rings, thought about, Aragorn needs to be more flawed. Frodo needs to be more flawed. Tolkien lets the story do that. He doesn't like do what modern comics do, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna have the character suddenly become a wife beater or some crud like that. Freaking Jim Shooter on that with Ant-Man. Ugh. I like Jim Shooter, but not that decision. No, the character's flaws need to come through their decision making, in my opinion. Like with Frodo, he gets so taken in by the ring that he ends up nearly betraying the entire purpose of destroying it. But that's a natural action out of the story. It shows him that he's flawed, and not entirely like superhuman or whatever. And that's why I never understood why people say Tolkien's characters aren't flawed enough. Maybe characters like Gimli and Legolas in the original stories don't really have much character. I don't think you can say that about some of the other ones. But even then, I don't think their character's that important. Again, there's this idolatry of like flaws and everything that in writing that I really don't understand it. Why does everyone have to be a piece of crud? I don't enjoy that as a reader. Truth be told, whenever I read a story, and like there's an issue of like the main characters falling out and crud, or there's a story about how the characters are like being mean to each other, or like falling out in the last few chapters and stuff, or like all that stuff. I find that to be the least interesting parts of a story. Just when people are just so mean to each other, and I just want to get over with it. But Colin, didn't you do that with Meryl? Kind of. Sort of, to be honest. I'll admit that hypocrisy. But I think there is a difference of how I did it. Mostly that the audience knew she was going to betray Stephen to begin with. That's another reason why I did that. I never liked it when a story pulls the wool over my eyes. A twist is one thing, because a twist is like, oh, I didn't notice all that, or I didn't think about it that way. And there's clues, but then there's the writer just straight up lying to you, or the author being unreliable. And I hate unreliable narrators in that sort of sense. If it's a narrator who doesn't know what's going on because it's like first person. In a first-person story, I can understand an unreliable narrator because it's more like a testimony. In a third-person one, I don't like it. The narrator tends to be this like omniscient thing. And so why would they be unreliable to the reader? It's so annoying to me. Just tell me the story or you don't. That, and I think a lying narrator also just kind of... I kind of find it lazy. In my opinion, it's a lazy form of a twist. Like, oh, well... The narrator didn't even know what was going on. Woo, then why were you telling me the story? Why does the narrator still have this book written and he can't... If he's a narrator, how the heck does he not... And, like, he somehow knows the story going on ahead? How the heck is he telling me the story? It's a book or a movie or other things that's been made. I presume the idea of a third-person narrator is that they're reading about what happened. It's someone telling a story to you. Why are they unreliable? Why can't they do their job as a narrator? Again, in a first-person story, the reader might not always know. This is one reason I like Sherlock Holmes being written the way it does, because Doyle had it written from the perspective of Dr. Watson. Now everyone's like, oh, Dr. Watson's an idiot. No, he's not an idiot. He just doesn't know what Sherlock Holmes is doing constantly. And that's for the sake of... And yes, it makes him come across as stupid, I guess. I never thought of that when I was reading it. But it's more that Watson just does not understand the intellect of Sherlock Holmes. Like, when you first read them in A Study in Scarlet, he's like, what, Sherlock Holmes, you don't know about the planets and stuff? Because Sherlock Holmes is like, why do I need all that menial information in my head when I can focus only on my autistic obsession with fighting crime? And Sherlock has a point. He focuses on his obsessions and everything like that. But and makes people think, well, Watson's an idiot. No, he just doesn't grasp Holmes as much as he would like. Which is what makes Holmes so interesting, because the narrator there doesn't really get his friend. I think that's what why I find Sherlock Holmes like that kind of narration. The first person unreliable narrator feels a lot better to me than just a third person unreliable narrator. There comes a point where like the third person unreliable narrator can be good if it's like used for comedic purposes. I think that can be funny. But if it's not for comedic purposes, it kind of just makes your story feel a little incompetent to me. Like your own you as the I always assume it's the writer telling me the story when it's third person. Maybe that's not how it's supposed to be. That's how it comes across to me half the time, unless explicitly stated otherwise. So it makes me think: are you just stupid, writer? You don't know what's going on in your own story? Why is that? That's why I don't like that trope. I don't like that kind of style. Gosh, I've been ranting this whole time. Well, I haven't really gotten any questions in the chat either, though. So, but you guys see what I mean. I don't really get this obsession with such deep characters. And you know what's honestly, the more I think about it, the more I'm influenced by Steve Ditko, because he thought that was kind of stupid too. He thought heroes were supposed to be exemplary, like they were supposed to be definitions of exemplary characters, because he viewed it as a work of fiction, and it is. That's kind of how I'm starting to view things too. I'm not an objectivist. I don't always agree with that sort of lifestyle, but I'm starting to see Ditko's point about how just making your characters flawed for the sake of being flawed doesn't help a story. Yeah, it makes your character more interested with the drama. It gets sales. But you're ultimately writing a fictional story still. You don't have to use real people. You don't. That's kind of the beauty of fiction. You're not writing real people. You may try to make it seem like you are, but you're not. I don't know why we put on this self-constraining bolt of like, I gotta write this character to be very realistic. I guess it also depends on the genre, but with superheroes or fantasy, I don't know, just make a character beat up the bad guys and I enjoy it. I just don't get the idea. I just don't. Maybe I'm just stupid. Maybe I just don't grasp this, but in my opinion, I think it's just kind of dumb to focus on the flaws all the time. It's not why I come to read comic books. I got really giddy with Omega Girl, not because of the characters themselves, although I did like some of them. I just really liked the action. I really liked the storytelling of like in the supervillains and stuff. That's what made me really enticed. And yeah, I know I'm talking about realism early with the secret identity, but there gets a point where you can abandon realism to, but it's a suspension of disbelief basically. I have a hard time with that with Omega Girl because I think about yeah, she has a secret identity. This is a normal thing in comic books, but she's not hiding her identity. That's actually one of the reasons I give Emerald Man a full mask. Number one, I've never been a big fan of like characters having their hair out in comic books with their masks. Not just for realism reasons, but also I just don't like it as a style. When they have like that head sock and they're just showing their hair everywhere, unless it's a female character. But a male character, I think it looks stupid. Just go wear a cowl or like a domino mask if you're gonna do that. Or if a male head, like the whole like, ooh, I got this like, the only one who pulls it off is Gambit. Let's be real. Everybody else who does it, it's like I got this weird face thing where I'm just showing my face and the cloth everywhere else, and then I got my hair sticking out. That looks so stupid. It looks so dumb. Just cover at the top of your head too, and not only that, not only does it look dumb, but if you're a vigilante and you don't want your identity being seen, your hair is going to fall off in the middle of a fight. The detectives are going to find that, and they will cross-analyze the hair with your DNA. if it's on file, which they don't find it. And guess what? Now your secret identity is exposed. Or heck, a villain could take the hair sample. Look at how my character fetches. He takes people's hair samples all the time and whatnot, just disguises them. Unless it's like a female character, I get then why people would be like, yeah, have them have like their hair out and everything. I think it looks nice. I like my female characters looking nice and feminine and stuff. But that's one of the reasons I do a full mask is because you're not worrying about the hair. You don't have to worry about someone catching the hair in the middle of the fight. You don't have to worry about uh, their identity being seen and whatnot. Then I just think the full mask looks good. I've always liked how Spider-Man looked with it. I've always liked how gosh, what are the characters with full masks? See, I'm not thinking anymore. Oh yeah, Doctor Fate. Always liked how that character looked too. So yeah. Well, I'm almost done coloring these parts anyways. I'll have to do the shading and stuff. I can do that tonight. I hope everybody listening to this afterwards isn't like weirded out by anything. Leave some comments if you want like further explanation on things, but and I admit I'm very picky with my superhero stuff. I don't like there are certain designs I think just look terrible, terrible, terrible that I do not like. For very popular characters too. Or indie characters. Just never been a big fan of certain things. What's one character I think I don't like the look of? Oh yeah, uh, I don't want to get the Eric July fans mad at me, but I'm not a big fan of how Isom looks or any of the characters. I think their designs are a little too busy. I'm not a big fan of. I don't think I'm a very big fan of. I'm trying to think of other characters I don't like their look. Yeah, Cyberfrog either. I don't get out to me with the Cyber fans. I just don't like the a lot of anthropomorphic characters like that. I tend not to like Chrome Dog. He looks fine, but it's not my thing. It's very surprising. I was even into some stuff, except for the Reptilian. I like Reptilian like anthropomorphic characters. I always thought that those looked cool, or things like lizards and dinosaurs and stuff. I like that. The moment it becomes like a mammal or an amphibian or other type of animal, just make it more human designed. Otherwise, I'm not a really big fan. And I don't want to instill anyone's wrath. Don't think I'm hating on things just for the sake of hating. I'm not trying to. I just some designs I don't like, and it really doesn't. A design can make and break wanting to read a comic for me. And sometimes I feel like people try too hard or they try too little. And they just don't. And now I know people might say, "Oh, your characters look generic." Yeah, they sometimes do, but I go off of what I think looks good to me. And I'll be honest, I've always been more of a fan of the more plain designs. like Batman and Superman and stuff. It just looks better to me. A less busy costume, the better for me. It's what I remember when I like if you guys have ever seen some of my first sorry, I had something on my screen. If you guys have ever seen some of my first concepts, I've posted it before. But Emerald Man, at least of his current rendition, it was a really busy design. And I'll be honest, eventually I got tired of it, so I really stripped it down to be a lot more simple. And I like it a lot better now. And that's kind of just a rule I go off of nowadays. The less busy a design, the better. So, how long have I been streaming? I don't know. Probably been an hour or so now. But yeah, I just busy designs are not my thing with comic book characters. Make them simple. Hold on, I got a message. I should probably make that a different color. There we go. It looks a little better. So, I just never liked busy designs. Simpler, the better. It's like what I'm doing here with Sapphire Swan's costume. Mostly all she has are these two colors. They're very geometric. And they look good. I like to point out to the Incredibles designs. They're really, really simple and they look really good. The most complexity they have is with the logo, and that's it. And yet they're incredibly iconic. You don't really need to go super crazy with costumes. I think that's the problem some people have. They've just. Or another thing that really freaking bothers me is just somebody wearing civilian clothes. The only one who ever pulled that off to me was Steve Ditko, and that was it. Otherwise, everybody's like, because he had style. He would have his characters wear suits and crap. That looks nice. But then, like the people with the civilian clothes, are like, ooh, I'm in a hoodie and jeans and crap. I hate that. That's not a costume. Oh, Cole, they don't have to wear a costume. Yeah, they do. It's part of the freaking genre. And you're gonna call it a costume. Like you go to a store and you find like a Luke Cage costume. Well, all he does is wear some yellow shirt and jeans. That's still a costume, and I don't like it as a costume. He needs a proper costume. I unironically like it better when he has like the metal band thing in his head. At least I could tell it was Luke Cage and not some generic black guy. Okay, I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. When I first saw like modern Luke Cage, I'm like, who the heck is that? So that's just how it is for me. I get very, I just prefer. And yes, I know the shirt and jeans is a simpler design technically. Whatever. It's not a costume. It's not a costume. You can do better. Oh, but Colin, it's realistic. Again, you're writing a superhero comic. They're not realistic by default. Don't give me that realistic bullcrud. You're not writing a freaking like war novel or whatever. You're writing a superhero comic where the characters wear silly. They fight supervillains. Maybe a supervillain can get away with a realistic thing. I've never been a big fan, and I know why. Some people are like, "Oh, I can't handle the costume. It's too silly." Maybe superheroes aren't your thing then. Have we considered this? Maybe you might just be more of a fan of action, but with powers. To me, okay. Here's the thing. I think superheroes is a really specific genre. If you have someone that just has powers, like actual superpowers, that doesn't make you a superhero at all. Batman's a superhero despite not having any powers. Why? Because he wears the stupid costume. He has a stupid bat cave. Well, they're not stupid. I like them, but I'm just saying, like, he wears all that silly stuff, and you just eat it up because it's like, oh, this is cool and everything like that. That's the genre. Could you imagine if they went with Bob Kane's design of Batman, or like, or just did something where it was super generic? Could you imagine if Batman all he did was wear a T-shirt and that was it? That would suck, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be Batman. You wouldn't be enticed by that. So here's the thing: you can do crime with powers. You can do like war with powers. You can do all these super realistic. You can do realistic genres, but with superpowers. I wouldn't call that a superhero, though. To me, a superhero is a specific person in a costume fighting costume supervillains, and usually fighting crime, or there's some mystical element to it, or superhero elements to it. Basic, or like sci-fi and stuff like that. Superheroes, they pull from other genres, but the genre of superhero itself, in my opinion, is a person in a costume fighting evil, and they have powers, or maybe they're like Batman, they don't have powers, but he's still super extraordinary. The costume is such a big part of it. It's like when you say the word superhero, someone's drawing like a generic superhero for like some corporate crud. They're always in a costume. That's a quintessential part of the genre. That's why I can't stand the whole like, oh, t-shirt and blue jeans crud, because it misses the point. That's not a costume. That's clothing. That's regular clothing. That's why I hate it. I had this admittedly irrational hatred. Someone's like, oh, look at their suit that they're wearing. Ugh. I don't even like The Incredibles, to be honest, but people are like, oh yeah, it makes it sound more cool to call it a suit. No, it doesn't. It's still a silly costume in the end. You either like it or you don't. I like the silly costumes. That's why I call them costumes. Because I prefer to call them a costume, because I think that's what it is. It is a costume. It is a silly uniform that you can call it a uniform. That never bothers me because that's technically what it is. But it's still a uniform. It's a costume. It's what they do their crime fighting and crud with. But a suit? What Stephen Barnes here is wearing is a suit. It's a nice formal wear. Well, suit's just another word for clothing. Okay, am I wearing a suit right now? Yes. Well, you're stupid if you say that. I'm sorry. That's just the truth. That's just the truth. I'm not wearing a suit. This is my regular stupid clothing with Spider-Man crud on it. It's clothing. A suit is something you usually wear something for formality and crud. Like, that's why... Yes, I know, you can tell me I'm wrong all you want. Whatever. I'm used to it. But... And if I'm saying you're stupid, I don't actually mean that. Apologies. But I'm just saying, it drives me up the deep end because... the people who make that stuff, besides The Incredibles, where I think they were just sincere with calling it that, I tend to find most stories that do that are embarrassed of the genre that they're writing. Like, oh, I need to have it more serious. I gotta call it a super suit, or suit like the MCU. I think the MCU is what made me hate it so much. Because I just don't get it. Like Iron Man, they even call his stuff a suit in the MCU. He's not wearing a suit. He's wearing armor. That's not a suit. Captain America, he's wearing a uniform. It's technically military gear in the MCU. The Hulk, he's not wearing a suit. That's just his pants. Now the Hulk, I think, gets away with it with only wearing pants and stuff, only because he's a monster. He's more of a monster than a superhero. He just happens to fight supervillains. But his skin's part of the costume too. Kind of like my Marrow character. I thought, should I give her a more complex costume? I realized no. The whole like her skin and like evil like fish appearances, darling. That's how she sounds to me whenever I'm like writing the dialogue. Her whole fish appearance, darling. That's more for skin. It's more for what her actual costuming is there. If that makes any sense. But it's not a suit. That's a costume to me still. That makes sense? Okay. Thor, he wears a costume. That's not a super suit. You could technically call it armor too. Ant-Man and the Wasp, they wear costumes that are, or heck, even you could call it a jumpsuit or uniform. Nobody is, besides like Nick Fury, is wearing a suit. Besides some of the villains in the MCU who are like evil spies or crud like that in like the Captain America films. Otherwise, no one's wearing a suit. They're wearing a uniform. They're wearing a costume. They're wearing armor. Or if you're Hulk, you're just half naked. But it's not a suit. And so whenever they're like suit up or, well, okay, actually that expression's fine. But whenever they call it a suit, it's like ugh. I hate it. It's a pet peeve. I know I'm irrational for it. I don't care. You call something, you called it. If you ever call Emerald Man's robes a super suit, I'm gonna throw hands. I'm gonna throw hands. I call them robes or a costume. Whenever if you notice that, because there technically are robes. He's technically wearing a like robes, everything for like because he's a druid. I don't call it a suit. What Sapphire Swan here is going to be wearing, that's a costume, or at least a uniform. That's not a suit. Okay, I'm done ranting about the suit. Sorry. Yeah, I know I got bad takes, whatever. It's what I tell my friend at work, Jonathan. I tell him I'm the king of bad takes and being a hater. That's how I am as a person. No, it's not my personality. I won't say that. That's because that's stupid too. But I I like to really hold on to my opinions there, and there are pet peeves of mine when it comes to superheroes. Because I love the genre. I love superheroes. And I'm so tired of people trying to turn it into something it's not. It's about vigilantes of alternate identities wearing silly costumes, fighting bad guys. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about with that. I love it. If you don't like it, maybe and you're like, oh, I need all this realistic stuff. That's great for you, but maybe you also just don't like the genre as much as you think you do. No, I'm not trying to make a no true Scotsman thing. I'm just saying, like, that's a quintessential part of the genre there. That was how Joe Shuster, and I'm forgetting the other Superman creator, I'm sorry. Or Siegel and Schuster, yeah, that's what it was. They made Superman with the they based it off of a strongman uniform. And like circus and cred. It's been there since the beginning. All the classic superheroes you think of have costumes. The silly costumes. Is part of it. The silliness is part of the genre. The whimsy is part of the genre. It's why I'm so tired of all this bleak and darkness. Anyways, I know I have bad takes, but you guys just gotta deal with it. I'm terrible. Oh yeah, speaking of fishy hands, I was doing Marrow. I actually have like voices I tend to make when I'm actually writing out the dialogue. Like I usually write it out in like pen and paper and whatnot. Here with the rough drafts, I tend to actually voice that out, or like when I'm at work and I'm working in the back and nobody's around, I'll start making the voices. Which is why I think Marrow tends to sound like this. It's just a bit of a sultry accent, but it's also a little bit. It's also a little bit creepy still. And then Fetch is very much the same there, but I can't do much of an Irish accent with it, but this is more how he talks, to say the least. At least when I'm writing out his dialogue. And then Miss Matter, I'm not gonna scream because like she always sounds like she's screaming whenever I like write it in my head and whatnot. Um, And then Steven, it's basically my regular voice. He's not a self-insert. It's not intended to be. You know, I'm actually really happy that a lot of people like Fetch. I was really worried when I first wrote him that people would find him a little too creepy. I mean, my mom says she doesn't like the look of him. When she like saw the cover, she's like, "Oh, he's really creepy looking." She did not like him at all. It was kind of the point, though. He's supposed to look a little creepy. Glad people like him. It has made me get into a little predicament, though, because well, I'm not going to keep running the stories forever with him, obviously. So it kind of gets to a point where I want to ask people like, are we okay with like not having fetch stories for a little bit again? Because there's a lot of other characters I want to focus on. Some I don't think I've touched in a bit. Technically, I haven't touched fetch in a little bit too, but I just don't. The thing is with him, I don't want to overdo it with him because I like him so much, but also, uh, I have to be in the mood to write stories for him because otherwise I'll just start forcing myself and it won't be good. He's one of those characters I really need to get in the mood for because I have to be a little bit sassy, but I also have to make sure his plan actually makes sense because most of the time, whenever I think about what plan he could do or whatever, I just think, well, any villain could do that. So most of the time it revolves around, well, I'm gonna go steal the emerald and stuff. So I gotta think of a story that's more than that, and then it gets really difficult. And I try to think, like, what else am I gonna do with him for plots? And no, I'm not trying to say he's one note. I don't think he's one note. I think he's one of my favorite characters I write. But I also feel like you only write him so much until it gets kind of tiresome. Same with any character. Eventually, I will probably end Emerald Man maybe in a few years from now, and I'll go work on another character. I don't know if I will. I love Emerald Man so much. I've been writing this since I was young. But at the same time, it would be very hard on me to have to write something else. I have story and character ideas, but it would take a while to develop. I should probably start developing that now, to be frankly honest. But I don't know, I'm so focused on this. This is a story I've wanted to tell most of my life. And yeah, I don't use a program to do the word bubbly. I know most people do, but I just. When I tried to do that before, I don't think it looks good with my style. It looks like I'm doing a digital bubble, and then everything else is like my own style, and it doesn't look good. I've been told I need to work on my lettering, and I agree. I need more practice, but at the same time, I also I really don't like. I don't like how it looks when I don't do my own word bubbles. Oh, I forgot to make one. I just don't think it looks good. There we go. Well, I'll probably add the shading later on today because I'm getting a bit tired, but I think I'm going to end the stream now just because I'm very tired. It's been probably like, what, 2 hours now? And I want to stretch a little bit, do some other things. So, everyone who did watch, maybe briefly, thank you. And if you're watching this later, I would love comments. I would love some comments about all the stuff I was ranting about. Hopefully, I haven't offended anyone. If I called anyone stupid, I'm sorry. I should work on that. You're not stupid for having an opinion, unless it's a really wicked opinion. But other than that, you're fine. Anyways, I hope everyone enjoyed. I might do another one of these tomorrow. We'll see. I'm very tired. I've been very tired as of late just because I'm home alone, dog sitting. So, anyways, I hope everybody enjoyed, and I'll talk to you later.